Ooh,
Bingo, I see it live.
the Hangout is on air. Okay, so let me double check this. So make sure we are going to the podnutz.com/live. Are you in the chat room?
I think I am. Group chat. Nobody here. Let me go
That's
back out. Chat.
yeah, that's weird.
Chat is up. I don't see anybody. I don't see you.
Yeah, I'm in the room with the Podnutz chat room. I didn't see you come in.
Well, I just hit chat up in the left corner. That should have.
Oh! You gotta. I'm actually using the IRC chat.
Oh, okay. Then let me go over here.
I apologize. Yeah, we never did get into setting the chat up for Google Plus. So.
All right. Let me get the captcha going here.
What operating system are you on?
7.
Okay. I used Highlander in the chat room. Showed me it's called Ice Chat,
Uh-huh.
and it's much better than MIRC, I believe. It's just easier to use, so
All right,
that's what
here
I've
we
been
are.
using. Gotcha now. All right, you're in the chat. All right, very good. Okay. And it looks like the video is up online, so we're good there.
Yes, that's me sipping tea.
What kind of tea is it?
Um, green tea.
Oh, cool.
I do green tea and drop in a little bit of honey and a dash of lemon.
Nice. Bump that up a little bit more. All right, are you ready to go?
I am ready.
All right. And here we go. Welcome to Podnutz, episode number 94, a show for your computer repair business. I'm your host, Jeff Halash. Today I'm joined by Marvin Bee from mbsystems.net. How you doing, Marvin?
I'm doing pretty good, Jeff.
Good. Glad to have you on the show. Appreciate you coming on last minute and taking my email and deciding to help me out and come on the show.
Not a
Chris
problem.
had an obligation today, so he's not going to be able to come on the show. But good to have you. And I know we've been talking a little bit in email here and there, and sounds like you've got probably some good stories to share with the audience.
I hope so. I hope there's some that people can relate to. and it's not just me.
Exactly. I hear you. So basically, guys, this is Podnutz live call-in show for computer repair techs, and this is just an opportunity for any computer repair techs anywhere in the world. We've given out a toll-free number, which I'll give that out right now. It's 1-888-697-0162. You can call from a cell phone, landline, VoIP, whatever system that you have in place. Go ahead and feel free to give us a call. And if you have a question, we'll try to answer it on the air. If you have just a suggestion or maybe something, a topic we could talk about, that type of thing, we encourage all that. Basically, this is an opportunity live to be able to just share with other computer repair techs and business owners, and hopefully we can learn from each other and become better. That's my hope for for doing this live and being able to answer questions on the fly. So that is why we're here.
That's a pretty good reason.
Yeah, I thought it was. It sounded good in my head, anyways. Anyways, so what do you been up to, Marvin? Anything lately that's interesting?
I've had, well, they've been interesting, at least for me. Um, but I've actually, because my business model is probably a little different than most, I don't have the huge highs and lows that everybody else has in terms of looking for or getting new business. Most of my clients have been with me for years and years, so I've got a steady flow of business. Uh, the times that it gets hectic is when I've got multiple projects going. For instance, right now I've got one of my clients that has multiple offices, and we are migrating off of the service provider's managed firewall services. And
Ooh.
we are putting them on their own local routers with their own local internet, because before, the internet went through the service provider so that they could manage their voice over IP phones. They managed the VPN connections between the offices. And it just was so cumbersome for us to manage bandwidth. And if the users complained of slowness, we had to submit a request for a report. But when we got the report, it wouldn't tell us why we were having issues. It may say, oh yeah, you're pegging your bandwidth for 6 hours today, but they couldn't tell us why.
Oh,
And
wow.
the other problem was we could not reasonably set up internet content filtering.
Okay.
So if we wanted to block people from Facebook or streaming music and all of that stuff, we couldn't do it. Basically, the option was to set up everyone as an individual user and then have them log in through the managed firewall. And we're talking, 140 people over 6 offices. And
Oh,
and this law firm has a fairly decent turnover, so it was just something where every time somebody left, or every time somebody started, we'd have to, add them as a user, remove them as a user, and that was just too much to do. Um, so we're taking them off. We're putting in sonic wall firewalls at all the local offices. We're taking over the internet. We're taking over the DHCP. We're creating our own VPN between the offices. And then I've got a sonic wall global managed appliance where I've got all of the routers funneling data into that appliance, so that at the end of the week or at the end of the day or whenever the client calls and says, hey, what's been going on today, I can send him a report, and it will actually drill down to what services were using up the bandwidth. I can drill it down to, the hour, half hour. I can tell if people were on Facebook. The biggest thing that he noticed is that he didn't realize how many people could not do Pandora anymore at their local office. And so,
that's kind of important to some people.
yeah, it is apparently, and not important to the business.
Exactly.
So their bandwidth, we've already done 3 of the offices, and they've already noticed a significant difference with their
Okay.
bandwidth. When you got an office of 30 people and half of them are on Pandora and watching watching as much. I've even had one of them. I was doing Netflix,
Oh,
trying to
wow.
catch up on their episodes, during the day. So we
Now I,
blocked all
I
that.
understand Pandora, but yeah, the Netflix thing that sucks down a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah. Well,
Pandora, okay, I'm like, yeah, you a little background music or whatever, you can have
right.
something, in the back, but yeah, Netflix, man, wow, you could really if you had a data cap, you could hit it quite quickly.
Oh yeah, and it happened to be one of their remote offices, so there wasn't actual management there to monitor that.
Okay.
So it was one of those offices where it's like 8 people in that office. But since I put the sonic wall in there and I put the filters on, I can see, even if they don't hit the site, the sonic wall will track attempts to the site. So we could
Okay.
see in that first day who was actually trying to get to these sites, because it registers the failed attempts.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
that's a absolutely fantastic report for HR when they want to talk about a staff person's performance. And Even so much now, I don't know how accurate it is, but one of the things that they've asked me to do is give them a report that tells how many hours people are on the internet.
Ooh.
The
Now,
problem with it,
you can track now? Can you track the difference between if they're using something for work on the internet or?
that's the tough part, because
Okay.
on the one report, you can tell how many hours somebody had, Google open or Internet Explorer, but it doesn't tell you what they were doing until you drill down. And so that's where there's a category for websites, and you can drill down there, but that doesn't tell you, how long they were on. It just tells you how many attempts they were on. It tells you how much data got uploaded or downloaded. So that's the report we're actually going with, is how much data are they actually generating between the site. So if somebody's generating, 200 gigs, 200 megs of, Facebook data, then we know that they're on there. And what's funny is
Wow.
some of the users actually know. We actually had to put in we've had to experiment with HTTPS blocking, because if you just type in facebook.com, they were blocked. But if you typed in HTTPS/Facebook/whatever, sometimes you can get around the filter. So we've
Oh.
had to implement that where the HTTPS is also blocked.
Now I thought that, oh, and maybe I was mistaken. I thought these sites that went to the HTTPS shut the HTTP down. Apparently that's not the case, or
No,
okay.
not as far as I can tell, and maybe somebody can help us out on that. But that I have found that HTTPS is alive, and for some reason there are some sites that it just doesn't register as a filtered site.
Okay.
So that's what we're experimenting with. I've only really had one person be able to do it, and so what I did was I just blocked it for that particular user. Uh, so um,
Wow.
there's pretty deep levels of blocking in these routers. You can do application blocking, um, within each category. So that
Okay.
if you wanted to open up social media for everything but Facebook, you can open up everything else, close down Facebook, and it would shut down all of Facebook. We
Wow. Okay.
actually did that for Google Chat, because I had a bunch of people at another site, you know, bringing up their Gmail and then bringing up Google Chat. We wanted them to get their email but not be able to chat. So that's
Okay.
how I found that out.
Oh, that's great. So you were able to shut down the application, not
Right.
their. Okay, so not the Gmail that they were using web app. Now, are these sites using things like Outlook, Microsoft Office's Outlook or anything like that?
Well, there is a category that is email, which is basically all the webmail. So yes, you can block, Yahoo.com, Gmail.com, um,
Okay.
Hotmail.com. You can block those as a category. I didn't drill down to see if you could block them by site. I'm sure you probably can.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So
Yeah.
the ISP's firewall, was it a standalone firewall or was it part of their equipment?
It was part of their package. It actually redirected to one of their edge routers, which we did not have access to. And so any request that had to be done had to be made through the ISP.
So what was the point of having a firewall if what if you don't have control of it? How does that help? A router could be a hardware firewall, right? I
Correct.
mean, so to me, it's like, what's the point? And it's something they're paying
Well,
for.
here's what I think happens. The customer actually approached them on their own to do this. Now, normally I'm involved with all the decisions that go around your internet and phone service, because if it touches a network, I want to be involved.
Sure.
But
Oh
this
yeah.
client, kind of said, well, we're going to do voice over IP. We know that you don't handle that, because I don't actually handle phone systems.
Okay.
So they went to the service provider, and the service provider said, oh, yeah, we can do that. So they gave them the phone systems, but as part of that, they said, well, we're going to put you on, this package where you'll have your internet, your phones, your service, all bundled together, and we will set up, the VPN between all the offices for you. And so at the time, it was great for the customer. They had one person to call for all the issues, but the service provider also got a nice chunk of change because they could charge whatever it was, $50 a month per location for the managed firewall. Um, and
It does nothing.
well, well, I mean, it did, but it just didn't have the flexibility that most clients
Right.
want.
Right.
So, and I think, for techs that don't know, that's something to really pay attention to, because, I've always, avoided having the ISP manage anything to do with, the VPNs between offices and all of that. But in this particular case, because the customer was getting a voice over IP service, for all 6 of their offices, I just let it go, because I'm like, well, I know the ISP, I've worked with them for years, and I said, well, this will be okay. This will be my opportunity to learn a little bit about how they do this and what they do.
So it wasn't Comcast.
Was not Comcast. It was one of the big boys. I don't know if we want to say names on here, but
No, that's all right. I'm just curious. Yeah, we poke a lot of fun at Comcast, and I know a lot of people have Comcast and are more than happy with their service. And let's be honest, these companies are in the business to make money, and that's fine. I don't mind paying for a service, but at the same time, I want a quality of service, and I want to be taken care of for my particular needs,
right.
not what they think I need, or just to throw extra things on there. So.
Yeah. Now, I did run into Comcast trying to do this with another client that I was working with, but that didn't work out. But it was a mess. But so that's the scope of the project we're doing.
Okay.
Probably the one thing to, as a tip I would give to techs when they start to deal with service providers in some of these more advanced scenarios, is that you've got to be as involved as possible with every aspect, even if you're not going to control it, because even though I didn't have anything to do with the managed firewall, when it came time to make the changes and take them off of that platform, we ran into so many other issues, because once at the very first location, when we put that office on the local internet, we checked their phones to make sure their phones still worked, and we pretty much assumed, okay, we're done. And during the phone call, the firm administrator had come into the server room where we were, and it was me and 2 service provider techs, and he said, well, one of our offices doesn't have internet. And we just kind of all looked at each other and thought, well, that's not anything to do with us. Have them call in a ticket, and that'll be it. Well, come to find out, none of the offices had internet except for the one that we were at, because when they took down the managed firewall, they took it down for everybody.
Oh, ouch.
So I had to spend a couple of hours after that trying to explain to them that the other offices needed to be up on internet, and to get them back up, and we had to get a VPN between an office. So ever since then, I made myself a little checklist of all the things that we needed to do whenever we moved one of the other offices off that firewall, because we had to check that the voice over IP phones still work. We had to check to make sure that each office could dial direct extensions, from West Palm to Tampa to Miami. We had to make sure that with the VPN that the service provider had set up, and they were managing DHCP, I had to make sure that they turned their DHCP server off, because when we put our router on, if they were still, we had the same IP address, so we wouldn't have to change out the entire network. If their DHCP server was still on, they would conflict and nothing would work.
Wow.
And then we had the way that they do their VoIP servers is we can access them locally, but then they also have their own static IP external address so that they could get to them. So we had to make sure that the service provider could still get to them from the outside, but somebody had to be on site locally to configure it, because once they switched over the internet, they lost their connection. And
Oh,
the second place that I went to, there was not a tech on site, and the guy's just plucking along, and he's like, okay, I don't have connection, can you hook me back up? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because they never gave us access to their routers, so I couldn't get in.
oh
So we had to
gosh.
switch that back. That was a mess. So I just, as we went along, I had to make a checklist. And the reason I'm saying that this is a tip for the techs is because some of these service providers are so big that they have a separate department for each part of the task. They have a separate department for just the installation of the internet. And then they've got somebody in what they call translations that's supposed to kind of oversee, the provisioning of the IP addresses and the connection and the main router. Then you've got somebody in a phone service division, whatever designation they have it, that they're responsible for the voice over IP server that's on site. And sometimes those guys don't always know what they're doing amongst themselves.
Right.
So as a technician, I'm the one that's telling them, as we move along, okay, well, did you do this so that this person can still do this? And it's amazing how you would think that they would know these things themselves, but I guess the departments are just so used to either doing everything or doing just their job that
Right.
they don't think about somebody else's job. So that's been my joy. Actually hasn't been just this past week. It's been the last month I've been doing this.
So would you make a recommendation to people out there that are servicing businesses that basically you bring in an internet signal, but maybe buy your own equipment to manage it yourself instead of using the ISP's equipment?
I would do that. Well, the service providers, they need their on-site router for their quality of service.
Okay.
What I would have always done is to have them do an IP pass-through so that the customer's router is actually the one that is doing all of the connecting between the local network and the internet. So that even though they're bringing the service and they've got their router to make sure everything's okay, the router for the client is the one that is handing out the addresses if they don't have a server. That is, setting up that static IP profile where you can set up the firewall rules for, remote access or external access for phone systems and all of that stuff. So yes, as much as possible, I want the customer's equipment to do all the work.
Okay.
But
That would make more sense because when you don't have control of the systems like that, it can make it well, as you've seen, a nightmare to handle.
right.
And it still irritates me just a little bit that, because I have to do this myself. My personal router that comes in here basically is I had a nice Motorola router, Surfboard, whatever,
Right.
DOCSIS 3.0, no problem. It drops packets all the time. And the technician showed me. And I went in and looked, and it does. It drops packets.
Right.
It's still kind of irritating to me that I've got the piece of junk modem that they give me, and that's what I have to use to get the signal. And if you try to use it as a modem/router, even a wireless router, you can, but at the same time, that thing, the signal, there's no external antennas. It just really, it's kind of hit and miss. It works okay in some areas of the house, not in others.
Right.
And so it's really best to have your own external router that's hooked through the modem to be able to to do anything with that. So I don't understand why in all the services use the same stinking modems. The Eris series or pretty much the same. I know they all don't, but it's like, come on. Really?
It is, well, for probably 75% of their customers that don't have techs like us watching out for them, they walk in, install their equipment, and the network gets configured by their stuff,
which
and
they didn't
that's
write
it.
down.
Well, yeah. I mean, but it is amazing how many of them don't check to make sure that, yeah, you got internet, but do you still have access to your network printer?
Right.
And stuff like that. I mean, it's amazing how many times somebody's called me and said, "Hey, we just had," and sorry, Comcast, Comcast just came up and switched out our modem, and now we can't do anything. And I have to say, why didn't you tell me that Comcast was coming? Because you have your own router that's controlling all of that. Oh, well, the guy said we didn't need it anymore. Well,
Okay.
that guy's an idiot because
Right.
so, but it does happen, and the customers don't know any better. The service providers, are telling them, well, hey, we can set you up. This is what we can do for you, and this will be just fine.
Right.
And
Right.
most of the time, it isn't.
Yeah.
So I always will, as much as possible, tell this client all they're going to do is bring in the service. They need to set it up as a gateway, as a bridged modem, bridge router, whatever, but let us control everything from the point it gets in everywhere else.
Now
Uh,
you said you okay. So you said you're using sonic firewalls, and you probably have said this before. I think on the last Podnutz Daily you're on. What routers are you using? A managed router?
um, the sonic walls that I'm using are kind of like the lower end of the sonic walls, the TZ100, TZ105 now, TZ205, and they do a lot of the stuff that I want done. They manage the external connections. You can do dual WAN with them. You can do backup and failover. I do all the firewall services, and then you can also add the managed services for, you know, internet content filtering. They do have a gateway antivirus component with them, but I use managed switches for everything else.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, so for that, I have the router that connects to a switch, and that switch is managed. So when I come in and plug my tools in, I'm going to the switch and not the router.
Gotcha. So just because I'm a noob here apparently, so the so the sonic wall is an actual firewall slash router. It's not because the firewalls I'm used to is basically a standalone, separate from even the router. But this is an all-inclusive system.
Um, yeah, because they're they're like a VPN router is what they are,
Okay.
that you can set up as, they don't take the place of the service provider's equipment.
Right.
But yes, they're going to be your outside connection. So when they're set up with that outside IP address, when people come in and hit that, they're hitting that router. They're bypassing the service provider's equipment and hitting the sonic wall.
Right. Okay.
And then
I gotcha.
the sonic wall is what's in between the external network and the internal network.
Now, when you say low end, what does a sonic wall initially go for?
The ones that I use, like the 100 series, you can find between $300 and $400. So they're going to be, a little bit more than the Linksys, Cisco, Netgear, routers that you find over at the box stores, which are fine for probably a lot of the small business customers. I used to use Netgear exclusively for a long time.
Okay.
I did use the Cisco, Linksys/Cisco routers when I started
Belkin
doing.
slash Cisco now, or Belkin
Yes,
slash
yeah,
Linksys now.
yeah, yeah. But when I started getting into some of the more complex features, I took it a step up and started using the sonic walls. Um, the next level above that for my big offices, where I've got, my two biggest law firms, I've got the main office where there's about 40 to 50 people at those offices. They're the hub for their other offices, so we actually make a step up and go to the NSA series, which those routers start at about $1,000.
Okay.
They allow for more bandwidth, they allow for more VPN connections, more configuring that you can do with them. So
That doesn't sound that expensive. I mean, I just spent $250 on a personal home router, so to me, $300-400 for, you know, beginner one, and then even moving up from that. I think those got to be a lot better for businesses than
Well,
the.
there is. I mean, if you want to make the next jump up and go to Cisco or Fortinet, you're going to pay the price for that. Um, I just haven't really, you know, what is it? Have you used the
Oh, the TP link. I think
TP-Link?
TP link.
Yeah, I've used TP-Link for my small customers where, maybe it's 5 or 10 users. That's where I'll kind of drop back and maybe
Okay.
drop down to those other routers. If I've got to do a VPN connection or I've got to do something where, like in the instance where we're talking about, I want to be able to do reports on the usage, that's where the Sonic Wall has made a lot of sense for me. And like I said, I bought the appliance where all that stuff funnels from the customer sites to my site, so I don't have to, connect to each office to see what's going on. All the reports are generated from my appliance here at the office.
Okay. So Martin's saying that he's using WatchGuard for bigger offices.
Yeah, WatchGuard is a good name out there. WatchGuard was I've seen WatchGuard a lot,
Okay.
and where I've seen them, I haven't taken them out. I've left them because they do a fantastic job. I'm not as familiar with all of the features of the WatchGuard. They do take a little bit of configuring. Um, Actually, all of them do. Even the Sonic Wall. If you don't know what you're doing, um, you can kind of mess things up. I've had people mess up, VPN connections because they go in and try to put their own routes in for stuff, and they all have wizards now, but
Okay.
so for the basic stuff, they will all do the job very well.
Gotcha.
I think it's just a preference now. All the routers, I do believe there's probably going to be a consolidation where a lot of the routers are going to start to, the low-end consumer routers are going to add some of the business features.
Okay.
And then so you'll have a level where you're going to probably have all routers, you'll have the $50 router, but then I think you're going to see routers in the $100 to $300 range that'll kind of all be similar, that they'll all have, the business features of the VPNs. You can add the content filtering and stuff like that. I think they're all gonna eventually do that.
Yeah, Martin was. I was asking him what type of router he used, and I had an old D-Link DIR 825 or something like eight. Yeah, I think it was 825.
Right.
And I had it for a while. I spent it cost me like $160 maybe 5 years ago. Before that, I had here's what I mostly take out of businesses: the WRT 54Gs.
Right.
Great routers, but not so great for business use because even back then there wasn't a whole lot of things you could do with it. It was basically a pass-through router,
Right.
unless you were going to, flash the firmware or something like that. But I went out. I just ran to Best Buy because I knew my router was down. I had an internal router with my ISP, but I totally forgot about it. So I thought it was going to be without internet to everybody. So I said, well, let me just run out to the store before it closes. I went and brought one home. But then Martin Obando showed me some of the TP-Link stuff, and I was amazed at some of the stuff they had out there, and the prices were so much cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, for my family, we have a lot of wireless devices. We've probably got at least 10 to 15 devices, either wired or wirelessly, hooked up to the network at all times. So yeah, I know it's nuts. That's just how I roll. But anyway, so I wanted to make sure that whatever router I got would last me at least another 5 years, and that the wireless signal was very robust, and I was able to get it to all my devices. I can go anywhere on my property, and basically I have a signal. So to
Okay.
me, it was worth the $250
Right.
versus I could have got one for 100 or 150, but I wanted to make sure that I had something that was going to push that bandwidth out there, so that if I was doing something on my tablet out in the backyard, it would just work, and I didn't have
Right.
drops in signal.
Yeah. I've gone through that too because, well, you can't see, but I've got probably 10 pieces of equipment in this room alone.
We're
And then
sick, people. We're sick.
yeah. But I've done a similar thing where I actually wired my house from one end to the other. I've actually got physical wires that before we moved in, I had somebody put in for me. But what I've done is I actually, for my wireless signal, I use open mesh wireless access points so that I don't have to really worry about the configuring. As long as they can plug into a cable and get internet signal, they'll rebroadcast the wireless access. So, and I've only got 2 here, but I just deployed 6 for another client where, open mesh is really great. You set up, one configuration, and all you do is add the MAC address of the access point, and as soon as it plugs into a network and gets connection, it's going to configure itself with all the SSID information, and so that's what I've done for my Wi-Fi throughout the house is
Okay.
2 open mesh routers.
Gotcha. And I thought about that, to be honest with you. I thought about, adding some of those different wireless access points and different things like that, and I was just like, yeah, okay. So here's how I grew up. This is going back. My dad had, we had the stereo system, and it was the receiver, and we had the tape deck, and some of you might not know what that is. It's a little thing square about this big and has 2 little spindles that rolls tape through there and plays the music or whatever. And we had, the record player. That's a big spinny disc.
The big
you put on
vinyl
there.
ones, the big
Big
black
vinyl,
things.
yeah, exactly. So everything was separated. So when I was old enough and I was in the military, I got, my first stereo system, and I'm like going, okay, I'm gonna get the huge receiver in, it's, whatever, 800 watts. I don't even know what it was at the time. Yamaha, whatever.
Yeah,
And
with the 4-foot speakers that you could.
exactly, that's what I had too. My wife hated them. So I had these huge speakers. I had the tape deck. I didn't have a record player at that time. But all the separate components. Equalizer was separate. Everything was
Equalizer, yep.
separate. So all this equipment, and everything was separated and connected with cables. And I got to a point at a certain age where I was just like, if one device doesn't do it all, I ain't using it. So that's kind of where I've gotten to. So now I've got one Yamaha receiver with all the things in there, and I can hook my Blu-ray or Xbox or whatever into it, and everything plays through there, and it's fine. So.
Yep, I went through that. Now, a lot of things I still am that way. There are some things where I probably am still old school where I do want them separate. I do want my main router separate from my access points.
Okay.
So that's just what I do there. And I've even gone away from, even on my small clients, I've got a few clients that are less than 5 people. So you can buy the routers with 8 network connections in them, and run everything through that router, both for the network and the internet. But I just got away from that too, because I didn't want that one device, if there was an issue with that router, that I have to worry about reconfiguring a new router to everything.
That's a good point. So. Yeah, that's a real good point.
But
you've got that one point of failure, and then
right.
And then you're either you might be hit that way. Now your access points that you have, that's weird. Martin's trying to call in, and there's no.
No, we can't hear him.
He's yeah. All he's hearing is the music. That's weird.
That's our on hold music, Martin.
Yeah, but it's weird. It should be ringing through here, and it's not. That's weird. Sorry. Anyways, we'll have to work on it. Chris is not here, so I'll have to have him look into that to see what's going on with his phone service. It worked last week. Anyways, so the access points, are you able to separate them off your network to kind of block some different things if you have people connecting to those? Is that why you keep them separate from the router?
Well, the open mesh, you can set up an internal and an external guest network. So that's how I separate them. I don't really do that so much at my house, but for my clients, for one of my, let's say, the last one I did was the Skin Center, where we set up an internal network so that their iPads, where they connect to their their software, and what they do is they have to connect to all their devices on the network. They've got to be able to print from the iPad and all of that. So that's on their internal network. But with the guest network, for their customers that have to come in and wait for procedures for a couple of hours, I mean, they could be there, 3 or 4 hours. So they want them to be able to get their mail and all that. And that is separated, even, through the router on its own separate guest network where they can't see the internal network. So on top of that, though, we do have the sonic wall routers at that location where they do have the content filtering. So we've blocked out, all of the stuff for Facebook and all of that.
Okay.
On all of the routers except for one, because in the sonic wall you can do a bypass for certain IP addresses. So we have one of the access points where we've configured that IP address where it will bypass the filter, and if you connect to that particular router, then you can get to Facebook, your email, and all of that stuff.
Oh, okay. So that's separated from what the workers there are doing then.
Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's I mean that's pretty cool. Wow. So yeah, see, I just ran into, I was just thinking, on my Linksys router, so I've always had where I can have a guest network and a regular network, and obviously it does the 2G or 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz.
5, right.
Right. So the difference with this one, which kind of threw me off, was the guest network, it's kind of an open network, but you got to go online and basically sign in using a browser on your device. But it doesn't connect you to the network.
Yes. Yeah, and the Open Mesh does that as well. Basically, it's an authentication page like you would see at a hotel or whatever, where you cannot connect until you authenticate.
Okay. Now, are those as safe? I turned mine off because I was a little concerned. Are those as safe as having something that has a robust password on it versus being open and basically going to the web page to put in the password?
I mean, it's as secure as the router itself. So if you're,
Okay.
if it's doing an internal and a guest network, they're using the same protocols, the same encryption. You're just allowing people to go through. But if it's done properly, if you've set up the guest network to be separate from the internal network to where they can't see, and if the guest network is isolated, then they shouldn't see anything, and that should be enough.
Okay.
Kind of like a VLAN, where they're on a separate VLAN and they can't get over to the local network. Was that Martin coming in?
No, I had just opened up. I was going to give him another number, business number to call that I can hopefully hook through here. But okay, so yeah, while I'm doing that. So anyway, so now the access points will also help you get that signal to different parts of, depending on how big the facility is too. And
right.
Do you have to set those out at certain? Is there an overlap that can mess the signals up, or is there like something that you said that says they have to be X amount of feet apart or whatever in order to work, or how do you do that?
Well, with the mesh networks, they're meant to work together to provide the coverage. So if there is, if they're too close or they're far away, they will kind of adjust their signals to kind of give a uniform coverage. I've probably not been in a facility where it's, I've been able to test how close or how far away I can put them. I've got the most I've got in one location is 4, and I've got two on one side of the building and 2 on the other side because their officers are split. And if I know that coverage doesn't make it from the front of the office to the back, I just put an access point on each side, and then whenever the customer is in the middle, they connect, but it doesn't really matter which one they connect to. It's just whatever hits first, they connect to. And because the SSID is the same, the customer never notices if they switch between one access point to another. So if they start to lose signal because they're walking from one end of the building to the other, it just automatically adjusts to the next closest access point, and they just keep right on browsing.
Gotcha. Okay, that was just weird. I think he just tried to call. Let me see if he.
He says calling. I hear you.
Hey, Martin, are you here?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
There he is.
Excellent.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, this is my new business line through Skype, so I'm able to use this number in case of an emergency. So it answered. The reason you could hear me is it answered on my phone, which is sitting next to me, but is muted, and it answered on my computer. So apparently Microsoft has still not fixed that problem of when you answer Skype, it should shut off on the other device. So Martin, what? Well, number one, everybody, I don't know if you know Martin or not, but Martin, go ahead and tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Well, I'm Martin Obando. I'm the owner of Obando Computing. I'm over here in the Pacific Northwest, just outside of Portland, but I cover, being a tech and remote, I can cover a lot of ground. I go all the way into California sometimes. So, yeah, and I just do network support for small, mid-sized businesses, everything from top to bottom, servers, networks, switches, firewalls, all the way down to even replacing mice, keyboards, and, computers and such.
Gotcha. Oh, that's awesome. And you're also the host of?
I'm the host of Geeksters on the Podnutz network as well.
There you go. Awesome, man. Hey, appreciate you calling in. Hey, so you said you use WatchGuard routers. There's something else named Watchdog. Oh yeah, it's a video game I play. But you use the WatchGuard routers for your larger businesses, and then you use the TP-Link for your smaller businesses. Now, what size businesses are we talking about for each?
Well, the WatchGuard firewall, the reason that one went into a system was at the time this company was they were changing over the point-of-sale system. So they really needed something that was going to be compliant with the financial industry. They wanted to make sure they weren't sure how they were going to process credit cards. They weren't sure how things were going to work. It's all really kind of settled now that it's been a year or so, and they actually just pay through QuickBooks or through Quicken. They use things like the Square or the Intuit slide, like everybody's got the little that connects to the
dongle.
Phone. They take the little dongle. They take the Intuit one to trade shows. So I think probably when it all came out, they probably didn't need something as robust as that because they paid for the intrusion detection. They kind of bought the Cadillac when really they just needed like a nice robust Toyota Camry. But I don't want to say that their loss was my gain. I got a chance to mess with the WatchGuard firewall and really liked it. It was one of the lower ones. It was not wireless. But it was definitely, plug and play. The Wizard, I just went through the Wizard, and everything worked out really well. I think the biggest problem that I ran into was that I ended up having to put the Comcast router into the DMZ because double natting wasn't working right, and Comcast said I couldn't just shut it off. Because when, in your home, if you have Comcast in your home, they just provide you the ISP, they're done, you take over from there. Well, in a business, it's an ISP, it's a router, it kind of does everything, and so I've really learned with the Comcast routers, the business class ones, you really have to put it into a DMZ because then it just makes your job so much easier. Then you get to manage the network and not have to manage two different applications.
For anybody that doesn't know out there, DMZ stands for Demilitarized Zone. I don't know why they use a military nomenclature to explain it, but anyways, basically what it does.
It sounded better than neutral zone from
Yeah, exactly. But basically, it opens your computer up. All ports and everything are wide open to the internet, going in and out, and so that you're not blocking any programs. Where the NAT traversal will basically it will pick the route or the ports and stuff that it needs going in and going out, and you can set up different parameters for that. So, but that's the basics of it. That's interesting to know, though, that you have to actually. So you're putting the modem from Comcast. You're turning the DMZ on for the router you have hooked to it, correct?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
I had to put the So if Comcast gives you, their IP address, and maybe, on the Comcast routers, you're going to get 10.1.10.1 will be their router, and maybe internally you're going to use 192.168.1.1 will be your say your WatchGuard. You need to go into the Comcast router and put that 192.168.1.1 into the DMZ. That way, you have basically told the Comcast router, just don't block anything, don't do anything, don't touch the traffic, just fully pass the data unrestricted all the way through. Now you can use your either WatchGuard or TP-Link or SonicWall or Cisco, Pix, whatever. Then you use your network to start monitoring. One of the nice things about that, though, that I found that I really liked, that you turn on your DHCP on your Comcast router, and the reason you do that is, but then you shrink it way down. Give it, maybe 3 or 4 IP addresses. Then if you have some networking issue that you can't figure out what's going on, you can go in as a tech, plug your laptop into the Comcast router. If you get internet connection, you can now rule out it's not an ISP issue, it must be somewhere else, or vice versa.
That's actually a great tip, because one of the things I've actually had to do here at my house, I know you guys are talking about businesses, and that's cool. I'm talking about my house. That's boring, but whatever. Anyways, the modem I got, I have to turn it in bridge mode, and I didn't realize that, yes, when I go into bridge mode on the modem, the router does the DHCP, so it hands out all the IP addresses to all my clients, or all the computers and wireless devices we have here. But I didn't realize that I could still plug into the back of my modem, and it's still a router, just basically a dumb router, but you can still plug a line into it to check it. Because what I was doing was I was taking it out of bridge mode, and this is how I was trying to check on whether my router was going bad. So I'd have to take it out of bridge mode, then I'd have to unplug my router, then I'd have to plug my computer into the the modem to see if it would work, and then so that's just a long way to go around that, and that's a great idea. Make a little DHCP scope that you can basically plug into wirelessly or whatever, and get to the modem to troubleshoot those.
Yeah, it is. Martin, just a quick question. So Comcast told you that they could not put their modems into bridge mode?
Yes, the business class modems, because on your home class, like Jeff, you just mentioned, you can go in and you can turn on the bridge mode. Comcast, from the technicians that I had spoken to, not just in this one instance, but in a couple, that the business routers don't have a bridge mode, and so unless you want to double NAT everything, and what I mean by that for listeners is that, say you want to pass traffic port 1234, you'd have to set up a rule in your Comcast router to pass traffic 1234, and then you would have to go to your firewall to pass traffic 1234. So it's like having 2 keys to go through double doors. But yeah, from what Comcast had told me, they couldn't take their business class routers and put them into bridge mode. You had to go with the DMZ.
Well, something must be out of whack, because down here we can still do that. And actually, I always force them, because what they've been doing is putting in the same router modems for their residential as their business. But I always make them put in the business router, because we can do the bridge mode, and that'll be interesting to see what's happening with them.
And that's
over the next
basically,
year.
what that comes down to? That comes down to firmware. And, whether or not I think the ISPs, I've had to, even on some of my modems and stuff like that, I've had to have them go in and write a little batch file, because, the modem that I had at the time was reading wrong. And, they did their updates, and then all of a sudden everything was working correctly. It just seems... One of the things that irritates me about the ISPs, whether it's business class or residential, is that, and this really gets me, they will leave a modem at a residence or a business forever unless you have a problem. And the reason I find that irritating, this equipment goes bad, and most of the time it doesn't just go bad as far as it shuts on or off. It goes bad as you have an intermittent problem. And customers are going, I don't know what's going on, and I'm going, we need to get your ISP on the phone. Let's get them over here. Let's get this figured out. They need to switch this modem. I don't care if they do anything else. They're going to switch this modem, because we need to move on and get this out of the, out of the range of what we're looking at.
Well, and it's not. It's bigger than. Sometimes it's bigger than just that, Jeff. Is that I've dealt with. I don't mean to pick on Comcast, but Comcast, where we had a client who was having an issue, and it was dropping, and it was fluctuating, and it would work, and it wouldn't work. So we called up Comcast, and they said, no, the router looks fine. We can see data passing through it. Everything looks fine. And I said, you need to get a tech on site to look at this router, because I know this is an old router. I was there the day the tech walked in. He walked in, looked at the router, and said, yep, that's a DOCSIS 2 router. That router has been phased out years ago.
Right.
Went out to his, grabbed a new one, plugged it in, up, working, no problems, and they've been solid ever since. But it's two different people. You got somebody on the ground who knows the hardware, who can look at it and say, that's a problem, and you have the tech on the phone who says all they're looking at is just reporting, and they see that 1 + 1 still equals 2, and they say everything's fine.
I'm kind of I get a little bit arrogant sometimes, and well, no, I'm arrogant all the time. But what I do is I will call, and I sit there and explain to because you're obviously, when you're calling, you're getting the help desk. They're going to walk you through a computer program that says, hey, did you do this? Did you unplug this? Did you And it's like, I call them up and I go, hey, I've done this, and this. That's not the problem. So we need to figure out what the next step is. And I get down to the point where I get the supervisor for that area. I get their phone number, and I put it into my phone. If I ever have a problem, I call the supervisor directly and go, I'm having this problem again. I need somebody to come out and look at it. Because you can't spend hours at a time talking to these help desks when they can only do so much for you. And they're going to go,
right.
It looks good. I don't see a problem here,
I think that's the culture of support these days for those types of customers. They've got a script, and
right.
They're supposed to go through that script. So, I do have, for my service providers, I've got, the hierarchy of phone progression, that if I call in and it takes me more than a few minutes to do something, I'm on to the next person.
Right.
And it's worked out, and I have it for Comcast, AT&T, Windstream, Level 3. What's sad is that they're all getting that way. Absolutely. That if a tech, and if you got to get the right tech on site as well, because if you get a tech on site who really isn't that experienced, or only can follow the script and really isn't a good troubleshooter, you run into that same scenario. I had that happen with AT&T, where they came out to the same customer 4 or 5 times, and none of the techs, didn't know what to do. And they were
right.
like, well, no, the modem's fine. It looks good. I'm like, okay, there's something wrong with that modem. And I'm like, either you change it or I will.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Martin, I appreciate you coming out and definitely sharing with us today.
Oh yeah, no problem. It was great to talk with you guys. Have a good one.
Hey, you too, bud. We'll talk to you.
All right, Martin.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right.
All right. So, do we have time for anything else? Any other tales from the
trenches? we've got a few minutes here. I think we're just a little bit over. We're almost at the 1 hour mark, but we got a little bit of time.
Well, let me see. Do I want to start another one of these, or I'll do a quick one, and then we'll talk. I wanted to get to a couple of things you and Chris talked about last week.
Okay.
One of the other projects that I did in the last couple of weeks was I did a upgrade of a client from just a peer-to-peer network where they had 12 stations that, well, actually it was 13, because they had a computer that was the server.
It was workstation that was named the server.
Right. It was just another Windows 7 computer that they purchased a little more beefy than the others. But they finally got to the point where they realized that, every day they had somebody who couldn't connect because they were, the last one in the building that day.
Okay, right.
And so they were just basically kicking each other off the network connection. Plus, there were some things that they were starting to do that they needed some centralized stuff. They needed to have the same network shares. They wanted to have, network printing done properly and stuff like that. So I finally, I think I had this customer almost 3 years. Finally, they called up and said, okay, we're ready for a real server.
Okay.
So we installed a 2012 Essentials box. And just for people that haven't done that yet, the Server 2012 Essentials is probably the low-end equivalent to Small Business Server.
Okay.
It just doesn't have, the Exchange server and the SQL integrated, but it's designed to be for, smaller customers without licensing up to, I think it's 25 users.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And it's really inexpensive. I think it was less than $500 for the software. So I got them a low-end HP server, installed that, and it actually worked out really well. I was prepared to use Fab's Auto Backup to back up their profiles and then restore them once I connected the computers to the domain. But the 2012 server also has a migration feature built in, so that when you connect a desktop to the server, it asks you, do you want to migrate your user profile? And if you say yes, it will literally, as good as can be done, migrate over the user's desktop from their local profile to a new network profile, so that when they log on to the server, they will have all of their desktop icons, their backgrounds, their programs exactly the way they were before. So that's a neat.
And you said that worked pretty well?
It did. There were 2 stations where it did not work, and so I ended up using Fabs to back up and restore, but I was quite surprised at how well it did work. I had tried to use that feature back in Small Business Server 2008,
okay,
and I didn't like what it did. It didn't do it quite, quite the way I liked, so we ended up migrating all those desktops manually. This time I decided to give one a try. It was a small profile, wasn't anything major, and that thing literally within 10 minutes, it had done the migration, rebooted the workstation, logged in, everything was there. So I said,
nice.
I'll try the rest of them, and like I said, only 2 did not work. Don't know why they didn't work.
Okay.
But I was able to migrate them over using Fabs, and that was a network transition that normally that would have taken us 2 days to do.
Right.
But because of that and the prep work that we did, it took us just 1 Saturday.
So when you're migrating from one workstation to the server, can you go from one machine to the next, or do you have to wait until that machine's done and then do the next one?
I went one machine to the next, but some of the migrations were pretty quick.
Okay.
Now let me qualify that. When I do,
I'm just wondering if it'll get bound up.
Well, one of the things that I do is that I actually will go through and do some of my automated cleanups before I even do the migration. So I'll go through and just do a quick cleanup of temp files, junkware removal. I just want to make sure that the station is clean, so that if there is a potential issue, I'll know about it before I start doing the migration. And my automated system probably takes 10 to 15 minutes itself. So probably by the time we actually did the migration, the other one had finished before.
Okay.
So.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I just wondered if I just wanted to know if the server was going to get bound up, because it would seem like that would really make your time go quick. You can just start the one machine, go to the next one, start that one, go to the next one, start that one, and then obviously you still had to do 2 manually. So.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, didn't really seem that bad. I also upgraded their switch, so they were on a full gigabit network, and like I said, they didn't have a ton of data on their workstations.
Okay.
So it probably was fine for what that was.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. And we've talked about switches and in migrations and servers and stuff, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of more stuff to talk about. What was the things that were talked about last week? Let me preface this by saying I'm probably going to take. That's not an actual show. I'm probably going to take that show down. And Chris already knows it. So, anyways, there are a lot of people that did watch it, but the quality was just the quality and lag time between him and me talking was so bad, and it just was not. I didn't want to put it into a podcast form, so that was a
Well,
choice that I made.
yeah, I mean, I liked somehow some of the transitions were nice.
Yeah.
With the robot sounds in
Yeah,
between.
exactly. I said, dude, you're sidelining. You're sidelining. But anyways, what was that? What was asked that you were?
Well, one of the things that I really wanted to hit on again is you guys talked a lot about setting customer expectations.
Right.
And I think that you probably can't say enough about that because, you know, there are things that you just have to let them know ahead of time.
Yeah.
You know, not only, you know, with what we do, a lot of times I will go way beyond doing that by fully writing out what my scope of work is going to be. So for instance, this last migration that we did, you know, they always want to price, well, how much is it going to cost and how long is it going to take?
Right.
And part of that process for me is to say, well, I don't know, but here's how I'll be able to tell you. I'm going to come in for half a day before we even talk about what we're going to do, and I'm going to do an inventory of your current system. I'm going to get a list of all the software. I'm going to find out what you guys are using, how you're using it. Then I can tell you what we're going to do and how much it's going to cost. Because once you can do that and say, okay, I've got to migrate 12 stations. I've got to install these software manually.
Right.
I've got to set up these printers. I've got to make sure scanning works from the copier that they have.
Right.
Those are all things that, you know, you really have to do your due diligence ahead of time. And that in terms of, you know, setting those expectations ahead of time really makes a difference. And that goes along with, you know, if something breaks while we're doing this, or if something doesn't work, because inevitably somebody's going to call up and say, hey, I used to be able to do this before, I can't now. Well, if it's something where you can't log into your computer because, you know, you've got blue screens or you've got, you know, something has failed hardware-wise, well, that's one thing. You can take care of that. You can, you know, if it's something you can warranty. But if it's a piece of software that isn't working the way that they want, that's not really something, you know, that I can warranty or I can guarantee. I just had a talk with a customer on Friday because we've been upgrading their network for the last 6 months, and finally they decided that the owner wanted to put a copy of the QuickBooks company file on the network server so that his admin can also access it. So I said, okay, that's no big deal, and I asked them, you know, does she have QuickBooks? He goes, oh yeah, we use it, we do that, you know. So I said, okay, so I put it on there, and he was working fine, but she wasn't. And it took me about a day or so, but I finally logged on and realized that she's using a different version of QuickBooks than he is. He had decided that he would upgrade his version, but didn't bother to upgrade hers, and they thought it was my fault.
Wow.
I said, how can that be my fault? You upgraded and didn't tell me.
Right.
So, you know, even as something along those lines of, you know, early on, this is a new customer, so we're kind of still in that phase of setting expectations. But
the honeymoon phase.
Yeah. But part of my discussion with him is you can't make a change on anything that you have, not tell me about it, but then expect me to make it right at no cost. That's just never going to happen.
Right.
So
absolutely.
If you do something and something doesn't work, you break it or whatever, that's a cost. Doesn't matter how big or how small it is. Now, if I do something and I configure something on your network and it stops working, then yeah, that's on me.
Right. Absolutely.
But that's where the due diligence part comes in, where I make customers pay me early before I even do anything just to do that due diligence. So if I've got to come in and you know, install a new piece of software, you know, it's going to take time for me to do the research to make sure all the computers are able to meet the system requirements, that they've got enough RAM, they've got enough, hard drive space.
Right.
And so even if I run a program that gives me all that information, I've still got to look through it. So I let them know that it's going to take me some time, times X number of computers for me just to do the research. And that's probably one of the biggest things I've done over the last few years is I'm making my customers pay me for research time now.
Okay.
Before, and I know a lot of techs, we do this, we consider that as part of our learning, that, we'll do the research now, we won't charge this customer, but yet we'll know it for the next customer. But a lot of times you're doing research for a customer that you're never going to use that stuff again.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's partially true, but not really, because if you think about it, I'm not the best person to support your software.
Right.
Okay. The Intuit is the best person or the best company to support your software for QuickBooks. So if you want me to take the time and effort, what I used to do back in the day was I would require companies or whoever I was working for at the time, I would require them to get a some sort of a plan,
support contract.
Support contract from the company that they were using their software, because a lot of the stuff was custom.
Yeah.
And they're going, well, so and so learned how to use it. Yeah, he sat at his desk for 3 or 4 days to figure out how to use it, and then you guys go and upgrade it and change it, and you got to learn some things again. I said, I don't work in that stuff all day. If you tell me what's going on, I can research it and find out. But absolutely, that should be time that's billable.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, how many times do they call you with a question that it may take you an hour to research, but if it took the 5 minutes to call the company can say, oh yeah, do this, this, and this, they're done.
Exactly.
And if they're on contract, it's free.
Exactly.
So
the support contract pays for itself with just 1 or 2 phone calls most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're always going to have more than 1 or 2 phone calls.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, especially the law firms that I deal with, there's always somebody with a question. So
right.
And so I just wanted to just add that to that discussion of setting expectations, that it's just not about repairs and what happens if something goes wrong after you fix it. It's knowing their stuff ahead of time. I keep missing what they're saying over here. And the other thing is you had mentioned about people searching for lowest price.
Yes.
And you talked about how people want to try to do a lot of things themselves. And what caught my attention is I remember having a discussion with somebody about, hey, can you show me how to do this so I don't have to call you again?
Okay.
And there's something about that gets me a lot of times where it's like, so what you're saying is you think I make too much money doing what I do, and you don't want to pay me the next time.
Right.
And kind of a lot of times they're like, well, yeah, I don't want to pay you for this every single time. And it's different if it's a virus removal and the virus keeps coming back, and you want to teach them how not to get infected.
Right.
True. As you're browsing, watch out for this, or don't do this, or I'll add these tools that will help in that. But one of the biggest things that I have is where people want me to show them how to manage their server or how to, and I'm like, that I'm not going to show you. And they're like, well, why not? And I'm like, okay, if you go to your doctor and he tells you that you've got, a heart problem and, you need surgery, do you ask him how to teach you how to, do that? Well, that's different. Well, not really. I mean, it's different in terms of research. The internet has basically,
well,
it's the best thing in the world and the worst thing in the world because,
exactly.
If you want to learn stuff, you can Google it, and you can try to figure it out.
Well, and here's the thing, okay, and this is my philosophy. If I give you the keys to the kingdom, you're going to screw it up. I'm just going to tell you, you're going to screw it up, and what's going to happen when you screw it up, you're going to end up spending more money because it's going to take me that much longer to unscrew it up.
Yeah.
And so is that what you want? Because I guarantee you, it doesn't matter what I teach you, you're not going to retain everything. And I do this all the time. So if you absolutely, if you want to do that, that's going to be up to you. But you're going to sign a waiver or whatever, and that's kind of an approach. Hopefully that would shut most people down, and they go, you know what, whatever.
Yeah, I've gotten away with telling them, look, you can spend this amount of time each month doing this. So if you're doing this, and I have a lot of lawyers as clients, so I can, tell them, if you're doing this and it's going to take you 5 hours a month, how much are you billing during those 5 hours? Well,
Right.
Nothing. Well, what's your billable rate?
That's a good point.
And when they say, it's $300-400, I'm like, okay, so $300-400 times 5, so it's going to cost me $100 to do this.
Right.
So what you're saying is you're willing to give up $1,500 to not pay me $100.
Say 100. When you put it in that, in that perspective, that makes a lot of sense.
So I just, this DIY culture we're in, I mean, like I said, it's the best and the worst.
Right.
There's a lot of things people can learn to do on their own. Computers are getting cheaper. If it's going to cost, $300-400 for me to, come on site and repair your computer, $300-400 is the cost of a new low-end computer.
Right.
Although that's not what I'm selling anymore.
Well, no, and that goes back to what I've said in the past, is that your computer. Listen, you can buy a $300 to $350 laptop, and I'm sorry, but it's a piece of crap. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And your computing experience is not going to be that great. Yeah, I guess if you just go online and you check email, webmail or whatever, it might be fine for something like that. But here's what I had to explain to a customer the other day. She brings me this laptop and she goes, she calls me and she says, well, the keyboard's lifted up and I can't get to my charging port. What do you mean the keyboard's lifted up and you can't get it? What does that mean? I don't get that. Okay, I'm sitting here thinking, the keyboard's not even attached to that portion where the charging port is in the corner. It's in the middle of the computer. And I'm like going, so I'm scratching my head. Well, you know what? I'll give you a free diagnostic. Bring it in. Let me see it. Brings it in. Toshiba laptop, one of the $270 ones or whatever, and both of the hinges are busted. All the plastic, all the grommets, everything is tore up on the laptop. And I'm in the things. I bent. I'm trying to hold the hinge down. Well, what it had done is they pulled up the corners of the laptop, so it pulled the charging port out, so you couldn't stick the plug in. So I said, I moved it back around and put the thing, put the charging port back, kind of crimped it down, opened the lid for it, and I go, well, I said, if you don't want to, I said, it's going to cost a couple $100 to fix this. I said, the bottom of these cases, you can't glue these things. They won't hold. The springs are just too tough, and it's plastic. And I had to explain to her, I said, when you buy a $300 computer, it's a lot of plastic. If you're rough with it, or your kids are rough with it, or whatever, it's going to break. And these are the things that can't be replaced unless you're going to spend a lot of money. So it's not worth it. So, but if you spend in the $500, $600, $700 range, you're going to probably get more of a metal case. The hinges and everything are not going to be just the super tight hinges. They'll work perfectly and a lot better than that cheap $300 laptop.
It's the disposable units is what I tell them they are.
Right.
These low end $200-300 systems are the disposable units.
Yes.
Yes, they kind of look like, the nice china that you want to eat with, but these are the low-end plates that you get from the dollar store.
There you go.
If you drop this, it's going to break a lot faster than that Corel set that you have over there.
That's right.
People that use plastic forks over and over again, well, just wash it; it'll be fine. Okay, that's a disposable fork.
Right, exactly. That's a good point.
Your nice fork over here. Yes, you notice the difference in cost, and that's how I, try to describe the differences a lot of times. And
that's very good.
It's extreme to some people, but I don't know another way to explain it properly.
But the truth is the truth, and in our job is to tell the customers not what they want to hear, but what they need to hear at that given time to help them have a better computing experience, help them have a better experience online or whatever. That's our job.
Yep.
So, hey, Marvin, we've had a awesome long show here, and covered a lot of information. And again, welcome back anytime. Hey, if people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Best way is by email, and my email address is marvin@mbsystems.net.
Okay.
If you see me in any of the chats, I'm MB Systems Inc.
Okay.
in a lot of the chat areas, and those are the two best ways.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. Well, guys, you can find me on Google Plus at Jeffery Halash or Twitter at TechNutPC. And if you guys want to leave a voicemail, go ahead and leave a voicemail at 1-888-697-0162, and we'll go ahead and play that on the air. And if you'd like to be a guest on Podnutz Daily, where we talk tech to tech, email us at podnutzdaily@podnutz.com. And if you'd like to feature your product on this show, just email us at podnutz@podnutz.com. You guys can also help support the Podnutz Network. The next time you're shopping at Amazon, go to podnutz.com/Amazon. And I want to thank everyone for listening and subscribing to the show. And we'll see you next time on Podnutz. Very cool. All right. That was a very good show. I love talking about all the networking stuff and all the things that we do.
Yeah, I was trying to get some of the smaller business stuff in there and a couple of residential stuff because I know a lot of the techs listening are don't do the big businesses like I do. So.
Well, you know what though, the reality is a lot of us really need to start moving into that realm, myself included. So I think it's definitely worthwhile to get that type of information and stuff out there. So, but well, I appreciate everybody coming out and sharing this episode of Podnutz with us, and hopefully we get some more people out next time. Tell your friends and neighbors, and we're here every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and we will talk to you next time. Yeah, feel free we'll give out the number, and you guys can call in and ask any type of questions, business or otherwise, of myself or whoever our guests are. Again, Marvin, appreciate you having you on the show. So.
Not anytime, Jeff.
Thanks for coming out and covering for us. Well, I'm going to end the broadcast right now, so we'll talk to you guys later.